Part 26. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jinkui. Chapter 251. Seeing that he was really going to leave, the old lady hurriedly stopped him. "Young master, don't worry. You wait for me to think about it." She pretended to think for a while. "I remember, a sick sister in Lishun courtyard was kicked out. I thought she was pitiful, so I let her live in the backyard. I'll have her come here." After a while, the sister came. Ahu waved his hand to let the prostitute go out. He whispered to the woman for a long time, then took out a silver note and put it on the table. The woman nodded quickly, then went back. Ahu drove the car and waited at the back door of Chunsiang Tower. After waiting for a quarter of an hour, I saw the woman come out. The woman was wrapped in a cloak, her eyebrows and eyes were drawn very delicately, her face was covered in powder, and she looked beautiful and moving. The carriage arrived at the back door of Qian's mansion, and Ahu stopped the car. I looked around, and after a few ups and downs, they climbed over the wall and entered the yard. Then he opened the courtyard door, and the woman entered the door in a flash. The woman lowered her head and followed Ahu hurriedly. The two walked across the yard and went around to the front door. Only then did Ahu step forward to pat the door. After a while, the woman came to open the door and saw Ahu and the woman for a moment. Ahu said in a rough voice, "Master asked me to send her to serve Mr." The woman didn't dare to say anything. She stood aside and let the woman in. The woman took the woman to Zheng Juren's bedroom and then closed the door and went out. Zheng Juren was in pain and couldn't sleep, when suddenly a beautiful woman appeared, and he was very happy. "Come on, sir, my whole body hurts, you can rub it for me." The beauty smiled and took off her cloak. Zheng Juren's eyes instantly glared like copper bells. The beauty was wearing a thin gauze, and her white and tender skin was looming in the dim light of the candle. Zheng Juren instantly raised his head with enthusiasm and stretched out his hand. "Come on, come and give me a rub for the master." The beauty smiled sweetly, and walked towards Zheng Juren with all kinds of style. Ahu waited outside the back door for over an hour when the woman opened the door and came out. The two got into the car. Ahu sent the woman to the back door of Chunsiang building, and then drove the car back. Zhang Yuzi was lying on the bed and hadn't fallen asleep, and when he heard the sound of Ahu driving the carriage in, he closed his eyes with confidence. Ahu first went to the kitchen to get hot water and took a bath. She went to the shop again to find the kind of disinfectant that Gu Yunjiao often used and sprinkled it all over her body, and then she went to bed. The next day, when Gu Yunjiao woke up early, she could only smell the smell of disinfectant in the shop. She thought the potion had been spilled and had the guys wipe it all around. When they arrived, an official messenger suddenly came to the door of Rengzintang. Gu Yunjiao thought to herself that she was here to collect taxes. Just as he was about to take the money, he saw two officials came in and looked around. "Who is the owner of Rengzintang?" Gu Yunjiao stood up. "I am." The official waved his hand. "Come with us." At this time, Zhang Yuzi and Linchuo, who were playing chess in the corner, also stood up. Gu Yunjiao didn't know what happened, and turned to look at Zhang Yuzi. Zhang Yuzi walked over quickly and said in a low voice, "We'll follow along, nothing will happen, I've arranged everything, don't worry." Hearing this, Gu Yunjiao immediately felt at ease. She knew that Saburo had always been thoughtful. He said that if the arrangement was made, there would definitely be no problem. She explained to Zhang Shun and went out with the official messenger. Ahu stayed in the shop. Linchuo and Zhang Yuzi followed behind Gu Yunjiao. The group soon arrived at the government office in Xiangcheng. Gu Yunjiao lifted her foot to go in, and saw Zheng Juren lying on a door panel, moaning. Seeing Gu Yunjiao come in, Zheng Juren showed a sinister smile. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jinkui. Chapter 252. The prefect of the hall slapped the gavel suddenly. The Yamen killing sticks on both sides stomped on the ground so loudly. Gu Yunjiao knelt down silently. Zhang Yuzi and Lin Chuo, who came in, stood behind Gu Yunjiao. The prefect in the hall squinted, who is kneeling. Gu Yunjiao lowered her head and said, Gu Yunjiao, the girl of the people, is the shopkeeper of Rengzintang. The prefect's eyes fell on Lin Chuo and Zhang Yuzi, who is standing. One of Zhang Yu handed over, the next one is Rengzintang's man, Zhang Yuzi, a scholar in Chunlin County. Lin Chuo also cupped his hands, the next one is the guard of Rengzintang, the general of the great Chu Zongwu Lin Chuo. The prefect in the hall was agitated, and General Zongwu was of the fourth rank, the same rank as his prefect. However, the Chinese officers of the Great Chu army ruled over the military attaches, and officials of the same rank naturally respected the civil officers. This position of loyal military general also has real positions in the army, and some are false titles, most of which are used by the emperor to reward some honorable children. The prefect quickly turned away. This Lin Chuo is definitely not a real position in the army, otherwise he can't stand here right now, which only shows that Lin Chuo is very likely to be a son of honor. How could such a person condescend to be in a small benevolence hall? The prefect was puzzled, but the balance in his heart tilted involuntarily to Lin Chuo's side. If he didn't know how to vote, he would not be able to take this seat. Zheng Juren, who was lying on the ground, was stunned. He looked at Lin Chuo stupidly. The one who beat him turned out to be an official? This official is crazy. If you don't do a good official, you go to Rengzintang as a guard. How is he going to fight this lawsuit? Even Zhang Yuzi couldn't help but glance at Lin Chuo. You had said earlier that you were a fourth-rank official, and he wouldn't have to go to the prince to get a post. Gu Yunjiao, who was kneeling on the ground, was completely calm. The brocade clothes on Lin Chuo's body and his unusual temperament have long told her that this person must have an extraordinary background. The prefect's mind became clear, and he asked Lin Chuo kindly, Zheng Juren sued Rengzintang's guard for beating someone, this guard. Lin Chuo threw up his hands, I'm fighting. This person's morals are corrupt, and when he enters my Rengzintang, he teases the owner, and he can't bear it anymore, so he makes a move. The prefect's gaze fell on Zheng Juren. Does Zheng Juren have something to say? Zheng Juren opened his mouth to say that it was Gu Yunjiao who seduced him frivolously, and that Gu Yunjiao's elder sister had committed adultery, which was enough to prove that the Gu family's family style was corrupt. He suddenly saw Lin Chuo staring at him. He suddenly remembered what Lin Chuo said yesterday, if he dared to say nonsense, he would cut his own tongue. Zheng Juren was agitated, avoiding Lin Chuo's gaze, and quickly weighed it in his heart, and said tremblingly, Master Qi, this is just a misunderstanding. It was because I got closer to what the shopkeeper said, and I was misunderstood. The prefect in the hall dragged his voice, oh, so that's the case, it's a misunderstanding, what about this paper? Zheng Juren waved his hand hurriedly, I am willing to withdraw the paper. That's the medical bill. He glanced at Lin Chuo again. Lin Chuo's eyes were like knives, and Zheng Juren hurriedly said, the medical expenses are also borne by the subordinates themselves. In the end, the subordinates acted improperly, which caused misunderstandings. The prefect is very comfortable. This Zheng Juren is so sensible, that's the best, so that he will not have to rack his brains to think of reasons to favor Lin Chuo's side. He smiled and said, if that's the case, then go back to your own home. Retire. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jin Kui. Chapter 253. Lin Chuo nodded slightly to the prefect, and together with Zhang Yuzi, went out to protect Gu Yunjiao from left to right. Zheng Juren wanted to cry but had no tears, so he had to let someone lift him up again and come out of the yamen. After Gu Yunjiao and the others walked out not far, Zhang Yuzi suddenly said, "Brother Lin, you are not kind. If you told me your identity yesterday, I would save myself a trip to the palace." Lin Chuo shook his head, "I didn't think about it that much at the time." Then he sighed, "Besides, my identity it's all in the past. From now on, I'll just be a guard of Rengzintang." Zhang Yuzi didn't say any more. He had already seen that there was something sad about Lin Chuo, and it was a hurdle that he couldn't get over. When the group returned home, they saw Mrs. Chen wandering in the shop in front. She just heard Zhang Shun say that the official took Gu Yunjiao away, and she was so anxious. Seeing how many people came back, Chen Shi breathed a sigh of relief. "Are you all right?" Zhang Yuzi nodded, "It's all right, mother, go get busy." Then Mrs. Chen pointed to the row of seats placed against the wall in the store. "The Yellow Fangs said they were looking for you." Only then did Zhang Yuzi see the yellow-toothed man leading the two men to get up. The yellow-toothed man came to see Li, pointed at the two people and said, "I finally found the person Zhang Gongzi asked me to find. This is a father and son. The surname is Wei. The father and son used to take care of Zhuangzi and deal with the tenants. Everything is familiar." Zhang Yuzi asked a few questions in a warm voice, before he knew that the father's name was Wei Jin and his son's name was Wei Shang. There were originally 4 people in the family, as well as a wife and daughter, but they were bought long ago, leaving only their father and son. Zhang Yuzi saw that Wei Jin looked honest, so he bought the 2 of them with money from the Yellow Teeth. He took the people to the backyard to write the deed, and then brought the 2 to the Chen family. He first took out a land deed from his arms and handed it to the Chen family. "I bought some land, and the things in the land need to be taken care of by someone. From now on, the father and son will take care of dealing with the tenants, collecting rent, and paying taxes. This land deed is ready." Chen Shi glanced at the title deed. She knew only a few words. When she saw the number of fields, she only suspected that she had read it wrong. "Son, my mother is old and my eyes are blurry. How many acres of land are there?" Zhang Yuzi smiled, "Mother, it's 2,632 acres of land." Chen Shi almost did not pass. "Where did so much land come from?" Zhang Yuzi said casually, "Of course I bought it." Chen Shi knew it, and he couldn't ask any more questions. The Wei Jin and his son next to him were startled. They only heard from the Yellow Teeth people that the person who wanted to buy them was a scholar, and that they would manage the family's fields. They didn't expect that there were so many fields, and they were really busy in the future. Especially when it comes to paying rent, the 2 of them can't be too busy. Zhang Yuzi sent Wei and Jin out, and said to Chen, "When the millet is hit in June and July, all the family's expenses will be paid from here." Chen Shi said with a headache, "I can't read the ledger, and I can't keep it." She thought for a while, "I see, from now on, the money in the family will be managed by Yun Xiao, and she will keep the accounts." Zhang Yuzi nodded, "It's okay, mother and Yun Xiao go and talk about it. Then I'll take them to see our land first. By the way, they don't live at home. There is a small village over there. It's just right to live there." When Mr. Chen heard our house, he felt extremely relieved and said with a smile, "Go ahead." She took the land deed and came out of the room, took the 1,000 taels of silver notes that Zhang Yuzi gave her before, and went forward. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jinkui. Chapter 254. In the front shop, Gu Yunjiao was seeing a doctor. Mrs. Li didn't bother her, and went to sit in the row of chairs by herself. This row of chairs was originally used by Gu Yunjiao for rest when there were many customers in the store, but the business in the store was not doing much now, and there were often no one in that row of chairs. Gu Yunjiao's patient is a woman. Today, the weather in March is very warm, but the woman is wearing a cape and even a hood. Gu Yunjiao first asked her, "What's wrong?" The woman lowered her head, Her voice was extremely low, and she said after a long while, "Come down, it's uncomfortable down there." Gu Yunjiao's expression remained unchanged. "What symptoms do you have?" The woman's head lowered. "First, some erythema grew. Later, the erythema disappeared. It was just rotten into pieces, and it was neither painful nor itchy. I went to the doctor to see it before, and said yes, bayberry sores." Gu Yunjiao nodded and reached out to take the pulse. "The pulse is astringent and obstructed." Gu Yunjiao got up. "If you want, come with me to the consultation room, I want to check." The woman was hesitant at first, but seeing that Gu Yunjiao was a woman, she gritted her teeth. "That's fine." The woman got up and followed behind Gu Yunjiao. At this time, Ahu, who was sitting on the side of the consultation room, turned his face away uncomfortably. "This woman is the beauty he found from Chunxiang Tower last night. He gave her 100 taels of silver and asked her to cheat Zheng Juren." The woman refused at first, saying it was harmful. "Because the doctor said that if you have this disease, you can't cure it at all, you can only wait for death." Ahu talked to the woman for a long time, saying how bad Zheng Juren had sores on the top of his head and pus on the bottom of his feet. He was a big villain, and the woman reluctantly agreed. In the end, when Ahu sent the woman back to Chengxianglu, he couldn't help but call her. "I heard that the doctor from Rengzintang is a woman with very good medical skills. She may be able to cure your disease." The woman really came today. When he came, he lowered his head and didn't notice Ahu. Even after he noticed it, Ahu was not too worried. He looked like a ghost last night. If his mother was still there, she would not recognize him. When Gu Yunjiao checked, she first put on a pair of rubber gloves. After the inspection, she signaled the woman to put on her clothes and get up. After taking off her gloves, she washed her hands repeatedly, and disinfected it with disinfectant. When I came out, I saw the woman sitting in a chair uneasy. Seeing Gu Yunjiao coming over, she lowered her head deeply. Gu Yunjiao prescribed the medicine and told the woman, "I have to take this medicine for a while until the symptoms below you have completely disappeared. Come back to me for a re-examination." The woman looked at Gu Yunjiao in surprise. "Can this disease be cured?" Gu Yunjiao nodded. Folk commonly known as red bayberry is syphilis. In modern times, syphilis was brought into the country from abroad in the 15th century. It is said that Emperor Tongzi died of syphilis. The truth is unknown. Gu Yunjiao didn't know how syphilis spread in this time and space. She just checked carefully. This woman is still in the first stage of syphilis. As long as it is treated properly, it can be cured. Then Gu Yunjiao instructed her again, "It's just that this disease is easily contagious. Before you recover from this disease, you can't be with a man." The woman nodded after a while. Even though she was ill, the maid still forced her to pick up guests, as if she would not give up until she was drained. However, she didn't want to harm anyone either. She had the 100 taels of silver she got last night, and the silver jewelry she had saved in the past. She went back to see if she could redeem her life. The woman grabbed the medicine and left. When Mrs. Chen came over and dragged the chair to sit, Gu Yunjiao hurriedly shouted, "Mother, don't sit on that chair. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth." Author, Jinkui. Chapter 255. Atai, move the chair over there and wipe it with disinfectant. And then the couch in the consultation room will need to be wiped again. Wipe with gloves. Although under normal circumstances, it is unlikely that you will be infected while sitting in a chair. However, in modern times, there are also examples of indirect infection through toilets, towels, baths, etc., and primary syphilis is the most contagious time, so it is better to be on the safe side. Besides, I was a little nervous. Chen Shi was startled and whispered, "What kind of disease does the girl have? Isn't it a dirty disease?" Gu Yunjiao didn't answer this, but said, "Mother came out to wait for me on purpose, is there something wrong?" Chen Shi nodded, looked left and right, there were no idlers. She took out the silver note in her arms and stuffed it into Gu Yunjiao's hand. "You take this. I have discussed with Saburo, and I will leave the housekeeper's affairs to you in the future." Gu Yunjiao opened the bank note and glanced at it. It was 1,000 taels of silver. Not long ago, Saburo just gave her 1,000 taels. It seems that Saburo is really developed. Then I heard Mrs. Chen say, "Mother doesn't know how to keep accounts, and I don't know how to read the account books. The family has a lot of expenses now and spends money everywhere. My mother really doesn't have the ability to manage the family well." Gu Yunjiao had to agree. Chen Shi approached her again and whispered, "There is one more thing to tell you. Saburo bought more than 2,000 acres of land, and the land deeds are placed with me." When Gu Yunjiao heard the 2,600 acres, she quickly converted it into silver in her heart, which is more than 10,000 taels. "Saburo is mysterious, where did the money come from?" Chen Shi said with a smile, "In the future, if you want to eat meat, you can eat meat, and if you want to eat chicken, you can eat chicken. Mother has no opinion." She looked at Gu Yunjiao. "By the way, I have to make some satin clothes for you. The satin that they sent was too bright. I'll take it to the satin shop next door to see if I can exchange it for 2 plain ones." Gu Yunjiao hurriedly said, "No need, this cotton cloth is very good. The satin clothes will get scratched if you don't pay attention. I'm busy all day, so I don't have time to pay attention to those." Chen Shi thought about it. "That's true." Gu Yunjiao said again, "Mother might as well change 2 cyan and blue ones to make clothes for Saburo. He is studying in the academy now, and he has to enter and leave the palace again, wearing a cotton robe. I'm afraid people will look down upon him." Chen Shi nodded again and again. "You're still thoughtful, it's time to change into spring shirts. I'll take Saburo's old clothes and go next door to make 2 for Saburo." Mrs. Chen went in and took out the clothes. Gu Yunjiao told her, "Mother, you don't need to give money, just ask the shopkeeper Yuan next door to settle the bill with me. By the way, let his family take the personal measurement, and everyone in the family will make spring shirts." Chen Shi agreed and went out in a hurry, almost bumping into someone. She stopped her footsteps and stared at the man for 2 seconds, then turned back to call Gu Yunjiao. "Yunjiao, your mother is here." Gu Yunjiao had already seen Mrs. Li. "Not only did I see Li Shi, but also Lu Er on the carriage outside." She closed her eyes, suppressed the urge to run away, and stood up slowly. When Mrs. Li entered the door and saw Gu Yunjiao, she walked over to her and cried, "Wu, Yunjiao, I have found you." Gu Yunjiao also just got up and walked out. Li Shi thought she was here to welcome him, and he opened his hand and was about to pounce, but Gu Yunjiao let go and wiped past her. Li shied for a while, froze for a moment, forgot to even cry, and turned to look at Gu Yunjiao in disbelief. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jinkui. Chapter 256. Gu Yunjiao went out and tried to smile at Lu Er. "Uncle Lu Er, why did you send my mother here?" Lu Er was stunned for a moment, as if he didn't know how to answer. Gu Yunjiao beckoned a Tai to open the side door and let Lu Er drive the carriage into the yard. Li Shi watched Gu Yunjiao go in through the side door, and no one cared about her. She was like a club and pestle in the store. Mrs. Chen was going to go next door, but when the mother-in-law came, she was naturally in a bad way, so she had to give her mother face. She put Saburo's old clothes on one arm, stretched out her hand and pulled Mrs. Li, and said affectionately, "My mother is here, please come inside." Li's tears fell down again. Chen Shi murmured in his heart, "Is this wrong? Why are you crying?" In the yard, Lu Er and his boy got out of the car, and Gu Yunjiao asked, "Uncle Lu Er hasn't had lunch yet." Lu Er nodded embarrassedly, "I thought I'd be there soon, and I didn't stop on the road at noon." Osman thus heard it, and hurriedly went into the kitchen to get some flour and prepared to fry a few egg noodles. This one didn't need to be kneaded, it was very fast. Gu Yunjiao glanced from the kitchen window, and seeing that sister-in-law Osman thus had already got it, she invited Lu Er to sit in the main room. She looked sideways, and Chen Shi also came in holding her mother. When Mrs. Li and Uncle Lu both sat down, Sanya Sensible poured tea over. Chen Shi brought out some snacks again. "The pancakes will be fried for a while, so let's eat some snacks to fill the stomach." She grabbed 2 pieces of cake and stuffed them with Lu Er's boy. Li was still sitting on the chair crying. Gu Yunjiao then glanced at Mrs. Li, "Didn't my mother live in her parents' house? Why did Uncle Lu send her here?" Lu Er looked at Gu Yunjiao and didn't seem to like seeing her mother very much. She was a little confused about the situation. She blinked and started from the beginning. And Mrs. Li was crying and adding that Gu Yunjiao finally figured out the ins and outs of the matter. It turned out that Mrs. Li had been beaten back to her parents' home, and she was disliked by her 2 sisters-in-law before she could live comfortably for 2 days. "I despise her for nothing but work. Gradually wash all the clothes at home for her." The last time Gu Yunjiao went to find her, she was doing laundry. When Li was a girl, she was very cute, and when she didn't do anything at home, she washed her clothes. After marrying Gu Yunjiao's father, the family life will be better. She has always hired servants to do things, and she doesn't even have to wash her own clothes. The 2 sisters-in-law asked her to do things, and she did it while crying. The clothes that were washed were almost as good as not washed. The 2 sisters-in-law couldn't do anything, and they didn't let her do the laundry and let her cook. On the first day, Mr. Li couldn't light the fire, and only wiped his face black. The whole family did not see the meal for a long time. When they entered the kitchen, the fire hadn't even started. In the end, the meal was cooked by 2 sisters-in-law. The next day, the eldest sister-in-law learned her lesson and watched Li work in the kitchen, teaching her hand by hand. The fire started, and the vegetables were cut under the command of the sister-in-law. When cooking, the sister-in-law didn't say a word, and Mrs. Li poured half the bottle of oil into the pot. Sister-in-law was so anxious that she even said that she had put too much oil, so Mrs. Li quickly poured out the oil. Mr. Li went to carry the pot. Who knew that her hands were weak? The iron pan was big and heavy, so she picked it up, and when her hands were soft, the iron pan fell. Half the pot of oil was poured out, and when it met the fire in the stove, the flames jumped up to the ceiling. Li screamed and ran out. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jinkui. Chapter 257. Sister-in-law was also afraid, but she was even more afraid that all the houses would be burned down, so she quickly took a rag and threw out the fire everywhere in the kitchen. In the end, the whole family of the Li family did not dare to pour the water, and they beat the fire with a wet rag for a long time before putting out the fire, and the kitchen was also half burned. When this happened, the 2 sisters-in-law hugged and cried. The parents who have always loved Li's are not easy to protect her this time. In the end, the 2 sisters-in-law both gave their men an ultimatum, asking Mrs. Li to go back to their own house. The Li family knew that if such a Li family was allowed to go back by herself, she would starve to death within a few days, or perhaps burn herself to death by cooking. After discussing it with the 2 older brothers, the parents decided to find a family for the Li family and marry her off. The 2 sisters-in-law have no opinion. So she asked a matchmaker to find a family for her. Who knows, the matchmaker said that there were 2 widowers, and when people inquired about them, they were Dr. Gu's wife, and they all waved their hands and refused. The matter of Fengjia has always been the most talked about, and the story of Gu Mei has been passed down by almost everyone in the county. With a daughter like Gu Mei, it's natural that the mother didn't teach well. Maybe it's all the way, who would dare to ask for this? What's more, if Li's family is married back, she will be rejected by others in the future, which will affect her own girl's marriage. The matchmaker hit a few nails, and then she became cold-hearted and replied to the Li family, saying that she couldn't do this matchmaker. The Li family is worried, throw her back to her own home, which is equivalent to letting her die. You can marry and you can't get married. The two sisters-in-law had a quarrel at home, and they must drive away the Li family. In the end, the two elder brothers of the Li family discussed and threw her to Gu Yunjiao. As for whether Gu Yunjiao would take care of the Li family, they didn't bother to worry about it. The uncle asked Li to pack her things and drove her to Qingshan village. At the entrance of the village, the uncle asked Li to get out of the car, and then drove off without looking back. Li Shi went to Jiang's house crying and crying. Who would have guessed that Gu Yunjiao's family had all gone to Fukan? Li felt that the sky was falling. When she came out, the two sisters-in-law unabashedly expressed their dislike for her, and even gave her a face, so that she would hold on to Gu Yunjiao tightly even if she was stubborn. Li wanted to go back to her mother's house, but she was not familiar with the place in this Qingshan village for such a long way, and she didn't know where to call a car. She didn't know what to do, so she sat in front of the Jiang's house and cried. Yang Shi rushed out, drove her away, and told her to stop crying at the door of the house. Bad luck. Li went to the village and cried again. People who cried so much in the village came one after another to watch the fun. Lu Er listened to his daughter-in-law at home, thinking that Gu Yunjiao treated him well on weekdays, so she asked her daughter-in-law to invite Li to her home. Good tea and good meals are served. When asked what Li's plan was, Li only said that he would go to Fukan to find Gu Yunjiao. Lu Er thought for a while. At that time, Gu Yunjiao only asked him not to tell the Zhang family where he was, but he didn't say that he could not tell the Li family. Li Shi is Gu Yunjiao's biological mother, so she must miss her mother too. He knew Gu Yunjiao's character, and he was not afraid that she would not give him money for the fare, so he discussed with his wife to send the Li family to Xiangcheng. When Lu Er's daughter-in-law saw that Li's skin was fair and delicate, her heart beat a beat, and she was afraid that something would happen to the lonely men and widows along the way. He asked Lu Er to bring his own boy with him. Gu Yunjiao figured out the ins and outs, so she couldn't say anything. After all, Lu Er sent her mother over because of human nature. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jin Kui. Chapter 258. Gu Yunjiao smiled and said, "Second Uncle Lu has worked so hard. Since I brought Agi this time, let him have a good time in the city for a few days before going back. Just eat and live here." Osman thus brought the cake over, and besides the cake, she also made an egg and vegetable soup. Both Gu Yunjiao and the Chen family came out of the house and gave them the place to eat. Chen Shi whispered, "Your mother is here, I'm afraid she won't leave. Where do you plan to let her live?" "You're ready, I'll take Sanya to clean up quickly." Gu Yunjiao was so restless in her heart that she was living in a main room, and she had brought so many books that the main room had just been put down. The Chen family and the Li family are both elders and should live in the main house. Then Gu Yunjiao could only live in the ear room. But living in the front room, firstly, she couldn't put down her books, and secondly, she didn't want to live next door to the Li family, and she would collapse every day listening to her cry. Now there are vacant rooms upstairs. But upstairs lived Lin Chuoahu and Laoju. They were all men, and it was definitely not suitable for her to live upstairs. Mrs. Chen saw Gu Yunjiao's embarrassment. "Otherwise, the room I live in will be given to her, and I will live in the front room." Gu Yunjiao shook her head. This family really wants to live like this, and when people find out, she will be accused by thousands of people. Alas, the house was obviously bought by myself, and even a large house has become a luxury. She thought for a while. Mother, don't worry, I'll talk to my mother first. She really didn't have a cold for this mother, and she wanted to see if she could send Mrs. Lee back to her mother's house. Louis and his son Iggy came out after eating the pancakes. Gu Yunjiao arranged for a Tai to take the two upstairs to rest. She entered the room and saw Mrs. Lee sitting on a chair, silently weeping. Gu Yunjiao rubbed her temples, sat down beside her, and said softly, "Otherwise, if you stay here for a few days, then go back with Uncle Lu." Li shook his head in horror. "I won't go back, they all despise me now and don't want me to live at home. I won't have a good time when I go back." Gu Yunjiao said patiently, "You used to live in your mother's house and eat free food, so naturally they were not happy. From now on, I will give two uncles 10 taels of silver a year, they will welcome you back, and they won't let you work." Li Shi blinked, but still shook his head. She doesn't want to go back, she wants to be in Fukan. How nice here. There is a special cook to cook, she doesn't have to do anything. Also, following your own daughter is better than following your brother and sister-in-law. Besides, this is Fukan. She lives here and will find her Yulang one day. Gu Yunjiao saw that this way was not feasible, so she decided to change another one, and she coaxed Li Shi earnestly, "Then, you can go back to your own house, I will buy someone to do the housework for you, specially serve you, and give it a year. You have 10 taels of silver." Li Shi still shook his head, "If I don't go back, I will be in Fukan, and I can still find your father." Gu Yunjiao was helpless. It's not that she dislikes the addition of Li's family, but Li's crying all day long, which is annoying to see. She closed her eyes. "You can live here with me if you have to. However, don't cry in the future." When the words fell, Mrs. Li flattened her mouth. Gu Yunjiao raised her eyes and looked at her lightly. Li Shi tried his best to hold back. I don't cry." Gu Yunjiao couldn't help rubbing her forehead again, like she was bullying her. She took a deep breath and said, "Also, since you live here, you have to take good care of Xiao Chuan. I won't let you do anything, but you have to care every day whether Xiaoquan's meal is done and whether his clothes are warm." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jin Kui. Chapter 259. Gu Yunjiao herself is past the age of needing maternal love, but Xiao Chuan is only 7 years old. Can such an old child not need maternal love? She added, "You have to care for Xiao Chuan like a real mother." Li was stunned for a moment, her eyes were puzzled, as if she wanted to ask, "Isn't she the real mother of Xiao Chuan?" But under Gu Yunjiao's gaze, she involuntarily shrank back. "Okay." Gu Yunjiao stood up. "Okay, that's it. First, don't cry, and second, take care of Xiao Chuan. If you can't do it, I'll call a carriage to take you back to your uncle's house immediately." Li Shi didn't dare to cry, she felt that the current Gu Yunjiao was too scary. There is a bed in the wing, which was moved from the west wing. Gu Yunjiao began to go back to her room to pack her things. Mrs. Chen, Sanya, and Yingzi came to help. Mrs. Li sat in the main room by herself. Several people were busy for a long time before moving some clothes and luggage to the penthouse. There was no place to put the bookshelves, so they had to be put in the same place first, which meant that when Gu Yunjiao was looking for books, she had to go to the Li family's room to find them. When they were about to pack up, Rokuro and Gu Chuan left school. Li hadn't seen Gu Chuan for several months. When she was sitting in the main room and saw Gu Chuan and Lu Lang walking into the yard, she was a little afraid to recognize them. In the past, Gu Chuan had white skin and a thin body. And now Gu Chuan has grown a lot taller, because he often runs around with Rokuro, and his skin is darker. Li Shi leaned against the door, stretched out a hand, and shouted at Gu Chuan, Xiao Chuan. Gu Chuan was stunned. She saw surprise in Li Shi's eyes, and then the light in her eyes dimmed again. He hesitated for a while, before slowly walking towards Li. With tears in her eyes, Mrs. Li watched Gu Chuan approach. Her full of grievances finally had a place to vent. She hugged Gu Chuan and whimpered, "Mother is so miserable, woo woo woo, they all bully me." Gu Chuan's eyes were blank. This was the first time his mother hugged him since he could remember. He was vaguely frightened, more at a loss. Gu Yunjiao stood at the door and watched. She saw that the mother and son were a little amused. One couldn't help crying, and the other was obviously unable to enter the state. Gu Chuan was hugged by Mrs. Li. He turned his neck uncomfortable, and saw Gu Yunjiao standing at the door. He looked at her for help. "Sister." Li Shi, who was crying bitterly with Gu Chuan in her arms, turned her head abruptly to see Gu Yunjiao, and the pain in her eyes immediately turned into fear. She let go of Gu Chuan, hurriedly wiped away her tears, and at the same time tried her best to suppress the cries that she hadn't released yet. Perhaps this operation was too urgent, and Li Shi suddenly hiccuped. Gu Yunjiao suddenly felt that she was a big villain. She didn't look at Li Shi anymore, turned around and left. She went straight out, bought a set of bedding and came back, and made Li's bed. Zhang Yuzi came back in time for dinner, only to find that there were more people at home when he came back. He had met Li once, and at that time he felt that Gu Yunjiao didn't like seeing his mother very much. When eating, there are too many people and the table cannot be seated. Mrs. Chen let her children eat while standing. She was also worried that the children would not be served, and that they would not be able to eat food, either for this or that. Gu Yunjiao said angrily, "Mother, leave them alone. If you don't eat them, the food will be cold." When Gu Yunjiao called her mother, Mrs. Li instinctively agreed, but only after realizing it did she realize that she was not calling herself. The Prime Minister seduced me to give birth. Author, Jinkui. Chapter 260. Seeing Mrs. Chen smiling, she took a piece of chicken liver and gave it to Gu Yunjiao. "Oh, I found it, eat it quickly." Gu Yunjiao likes to eat chicken liver and chicken blood. After eating chicken a few times at home, Mrs. Chen discovered it. As long as she took out chicken blood and chicken liver from the vegetable bowl, she would always give it to Gu Yunjiao. Although Gu Yunjiao's money used to buy all the food at home, Chen's actions made people feel warm. Gu Yunjiao frowned. "Thank you, mother." Mrs. Li sat next to Mrs. Chen. I don't know why, but she suddenly felt that this delicious dish that was rarely eaten on the table was not fragrant at all. How has her daughter ever been so affectionate to herself? Thinking of this, she was so aggrieved that tears almost fell again. After a while, Mrs. Chen took out another piece of chicken wing. She hurriedly shouted, "Come on Xiao Chuan, there are chicken wings." Chicken wings are Gu Chuan's favorite. Gu Chuan came over with a bowl, and Mrs. Chen put the chicken wings in his bowl. He happily said, "Thank you, Auntie." Li Shi pursed her lips. She didn't know why, but she felt a little uncomfortable. After finishing the meal, Lu Lang and Gu Chuan put down their bowls and ran out. Mrs. Chen stopped Gu Chuan. "Xiao Chuan, don't run, the shoes I made for you are almost the last one, you go and try to see if they fit your feet. Change it again." Gu Chuan nodded, "Okay Auntie." Li Shi didn't know why, and felt even more uncomfortable. After dinner, she went back to the house sullenly. Sitting on the bed and thinking about it, I suddenly realized. Obviously the sons and daughters are their own, why are they so close to the Chen family? Chen Shi is too insidious. He is taking vegetables and making shoes for Xiao Chuan. This is to take away her sons and daughters. Although Li Shi can't change her temper now, She almost understands that her husband's appointment is not coming back, and Gu Mei doesn't know where to go now. She can't go back to her brother and sister-in-law, and she will only rely on her son and daughter in the future. How could she let the Chen family take away all her children? Li pondered all night how to get the children back. The next day, Li was sick. In the morning, Mrs. Osman thus called for breakfast, but Mrs. Li didn't come out of the room. She has already used the trick of pretending to be sick. In the past, when Yulang was at home, even if there was an unpleasantness between the husband and wife, as long as she said something was uncomfortable, Yulang would take her pulse and give her medicine in a caring manner. Before you know it, the relationship between the two men is restored. She decided to repeat the same trick and wait for Gu Yunjiao and Xiao Chuan to coax her. Gu Yunjiao didn't even notice whether Li ate breakfast or not. She hurried into the kitchen to eat porridge and steamed buns and then went to open the door. After Gu Chuan finished eating, he went to school with Rokuro. Uncle Lu also took his son Agi to visit Fukan. Breakfast was eaten one after another, and no one remembered that there was another Mr. Li who didn't eat breakfast. Li was lying on the bed for a long time, and no one came to ask her. She cried again in aggrieved. At noon, Mrs. Li was so hungry that she couldn't stand it anymore. When she heard Osman thus calling everyone to eat outside, she wanted to go out, but she held back. She can't fall short. Gu Yunjiao was seeing the doctor in front of her. After seeing the patient, she hurried in and ate a bowl of rice before leaving again. She simply forgot that there was someone like Li's. Chen Shi looked over the table, but he remembered Li Shi, and quickly sent Sanya to call Li Shi to eat. Li was lying on the bed and waved to Sanya weakly, "Tell your sister-in-law that I'm not feeling well and I don't want to eat."